Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.
Wrestling Omakase is back, baby! The weekly podcast that takes you across all the top promotions on the entire Japanese wrestling scene, from New Japan to Stardom, Noah, DDT, All Japan, Mari Gold, Dragon Gate, Tokyo Joshi, Sendai Girls, and a whole lot more. I'm John Carroll, a fan of Japanese wrestling for over 20 years, and every week I'm joined by a rotating cast of guest co-hosts as we break down all the top promotions in Japan, men's and women's. Check out Wrestling Omakase right here on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network today.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hello and welcome back to the Euro Clutch. I'm Ian Hamilton, and this episode we're going to be talking, well, the main talking point is, of course, this past weekend's Summer Sizzler. Yeah, it's another RevPro episode, I'm afraid. Of course, this past weekend we saw RevPro head back to the hangar in Wolverhampton for the Summer Sizzler. The second show they had with Mercedes Moné over, and in the main event she had her Undisputed Women's title defence against Sapphire Reed. Going to go into a bit of a backstory here. Of course, this show was, I believe it's announced just before June's Revolution Rumble, so a little bit hastily put together. And RevPro in 2025, they've had a couple of these shows just come out of nowhere, and problem is, if you're doing a journey without knowing the destination, you kind of get surprise stop-offs like this. Of course, the last time we had Mercedes Moné in RevPro would have been in April for High Stakes. Kanji got the title shot there and lost. Unfortunately, in a few months since, no one's really come out of the pack to be a challenger for Mercedes Moné. Of course, Danny Luna had won a high-stakes gauntlet match that some had thought was for the title, or for the title shot at least, and that went nowhere. So instead, we had a makeshift tournament for the title shot. So 3 matches at the 229 in London at the start of the month. We had Kanji against Sapphire Reed. We had Emerson Jane against Lizzie Evo and Danny Luna against Nina Samuels. So the prospect there of an all cutthroat collective final. And we ended up with Nina beating Danny Luna, picked up an injury on the way to the win, so that effectively ruled her out for the match. And I believe from bookings for the time being, she missed this past weekend's Progress show with that same injury. We had Lizzie Evo going down to Emerson Jane, and of course Kanji losing to Sapphire Reed. So we ended up with Emerson Jane and Sapphire Reed in the tournament final main event in Coventry. Decent match, but problem was, both of them pretty much on the heel side of the equation, so to speak. But we ended up with Sapphire Reed winning, and she ended up getting the big match against Mercedes Moné in Wolverhampton. Both myself and Neil David have a review up on voiceofwrestling.com, some written thoughts there, but we're going to go over this pretty quickly here. Opening, we had Shah Samuels beating Jay Joshua. Of course, the storyline with Shah is he's doing a win or bust. Stipulation is put onto his title match that he earned at the Revolution Rumble last month. Now, look, we've had this a few times in RevPro, recently, in fact. A couple of years back, we had Eddie Dennis, if I don't win the Revolution Rumble, I retire, and he lost, and he's pretty much been gone from RevPro and lately wrestling since. Last year, Sunshine Machine did the whole, if we lose again, we split as a team. They ended up winning the tag titles, and then that whole stipulation went away. So this seems to be like this time of year for the if I lose, I retire kind of thing, which is fine. But it's probably a little bit overdone at this point. And in the case of Shaw Samuels, and as Neil said in review, the character's been portrayed lately as someone who is, literally clinging on to the roster. It's not like there's a name you can point and say, oh, he's keeping him off the roster or he's keeping him off cards. But the current day Shaw Samuels character is pretty much, this is my one last run, my final hurrah. If I don't win, I'm not good enough and I'm going away. But it just seems to be the kind of thing where it kind of feels out of place when the overall theme of RevPro in 2025 has been you win or you learn. And you look at the win-loss records for a lot of the roster this year, a whole lot of learning going on. This one opened against Jay Joshua. Shaw was up against, I'll use the pejorative as a tag team wrestler. Jay Joshua, largely a tag team guy. And, this, really good, I'd say, the match of the first half. But yeah, as far as the storyline, you're not going to have Shaw Samuels losing before the big title match. So this is one I thought was a bit weird, having a guy in Jay Joshua who was part of a tag league tournament, which we'll touch on in a moment, go in and lose. But it is what it is. Shaw's building up wins, and yeah, he's getting some steam under him ahead of what could possibly be his final appearance in RevPro at the anniversary shows in Crystal Palace in August. And apparently Shaw's working both nights of that, which screams he's doing a preview tag on Friday, and then this is going to be the main event, his match for the title on the Saturday. We'll get on to that later on, because next I want to speak about the two great British Tag League matches. So the tournament came back, it was announced at the start of the July shows that we're bringing back the Great British Tag League. It's going to be wrapping up at the anniversary show, so very condensed, and we'll get into why it's a little bit problematic in terms of scheduling. But the time is just, it's enough way out of done miss. You've got two teams who having to backload their matches because of availability or other stories going on. Here you had CPF, Joe Lando and Daniel Black beating the Sons of Southampton. That's kind of playing on the already, dissension of story in the ranks between David Francisco and JJ Gale. That definitely seems to be a team that's being put together just to split up, which is a lot of people's favourite tropes in modern day wrestling. On the Block A side of things, we had the grizzled young veterans of Zach Gibson and James Drake beating the Young Guns, Luke Jacobs and Ethan Allen. Of course, the Young Guns tag titles are not on the line here. And this is a match on paper I was expecting a whole lot more than we got. The students and the teachers, so to speak, and you had the upstarts of the Young Guns. Granted, they're the champions. They earned the right to be cocksure themselves. But as far as the match, it just felt like particularly with Luke Jacobs in Rev Pro, he's really gotten into this habit of, when it comes to the real big matches, not being reliable. And I don't mean the performance side, which speaks solely in results. Obviously, last year he won the undisputed British heavyweight title from Michael Oku at last year's anniversary show, had the title defence against Tomohiro Ishii, and then uprising at the end of last year, lost right back to Oku, which, very disappointing and, frankly bizarre title run, especially for how long they had Luke being built for this run. Okay, granted, the tag division, the feud with CPF, they had to go to a place I really didn't like in terms of a plunder, but they retained over them. But against a much bigger team in Grizzled Young Veterans, they came unstuck here. And granted, the story may be the GYV win the whole thing, and then they go back to the Young Guns, and this time the belts are on the line, and they one up themselves, and the Young Guns retain. But it just feels like it's a lot of hurdles being put in Luke Jacobs' story, which really just don't seem to be that well timed. If we do end up, God forbid, GYV win the block, the tournament, and win the titles back, that's two pretty major knocks to Luke Jacobs' character in the last 12 months. And it's that whole thing of where do you go from there? I mean, heck, they've even said in Rev Pro, he's won everything there is to win. Is this would this be a write-off? Or it's that whole thing of, you spin the wheel because you want to keep giving these characters, setbacks for them to come back from. Again, we'll see what comes back there, but to me, it just felt like, GYV Young Guns match was a match that could have been a whole lot better, and if they do win it back, it could well be. Because unlike other round robins, Rev Pro don't exactly reveal a schedule here. They don't want people working backwards and figuring out what the final matches are going to be. But, right now, 2 teams haven't had their first matches, Cowboy Way and Conor Mills J. Joshua. So you'd think, at least one of them will have a great big run-up to the finale, which will be the anniversary show. So we'll see what comes there. We'll touch on the rest of the Tag League matches in a separate section later on. Second half of the show started with Beast Mortos against Robbie X. Robbie X, we've said at this point, has his spot in Rev Pro. He tends to be the guy who's trusted with the imports. This particular match was, international dream match, to use the tagline of years gone by. For Robbie X, the problem I have is just the whole package. He has the trunks of the greatest junior heavyweight in the world, but he's losing a lot more than he wins. And I think I went back in the review, he's something like 13 to 33 wins for losses in the past 18 months or so. That's not a good record, especially if you're going around, touting yourself as the greatest junior heavyweight in the world. And I get he's a bad guy, it's there to be pointed and mocked at, but when it's being said earnestly, as it tends to be, you hit a point where that win-loss record becomes a bit of a millstone on the neck, and truthfully, it's something they do need to make a bit of a U-turn on. I'm not saying Robbie X needs to go unbeaten on a big Roman Reigns run, have the belt and be Cruiserweight champ for the next 5 years, but also losing more than you're winning just isn't it. At least in this match, there's only going to be ever one result. At least Rev Pro did dovetail in with Archie Cole coming out to distract and have a part to play in the finish, but only downside there is it kind of gave away an age-old problem with Rev Pro that not many people tend to watch the non-marquee events like the rank-and-file house show, so to speak. So very few people in Wolverhampton, at least from the stream I watched, seem to know who Archie Cole was or even what this all was all about. Again, we've seen this years gone by when they built up storylines of a cockpit and they played out the sounds at your call. It is an issue with Rev Pro are trying to address through video packages and these recap videos on YouTube. It ain't going to be an overnight fix, especially if you're running every week, in some cases twice a week. It is something that is going to take time, unfortunately, and you are going to get moments like this where stuff just falls flat. Next up, we had the debut of Los Tranquilos de Japón. Bushi and Tetsuya Naito from Los Ingobernables de Japón, their first appearance since leaving New Japan in May. They went over Mark True and Kieran Lacey, pretty much what you expect, almost like a holiday camp thing with much bigger stars. Bushi and Naito played the hits. True and Lacey had a few brief flashes, but in the end, with Will Caven as well ringside, they were there just to be the comedy bad guys. It was what it was, if you're a big fan of Bushi and Naito, this was right up your street. This also was pretty much going to be non-canon, pretty much, It was there to get, some buzz for, Naito and Bushi's first match on the independent scene. But, yeah, as far as what it was, as the saying goes, it was what it was. What wasn't what it was, though, was Ricky Knight Jr. against Michael Oku. Now, this was a match that was built up pretty much out of nowhere, and I know the ongoing knock these days of Rev Pro is they seem to be pulling a lot out of their proverbial rear ends. Yeah, this was a feud that was kind of rekindled coming out of the Revolution Rumble with Ricky Knight Jr. attacking Oku after the title win over TK Coop and then bled through into the Rumble itself. Again, checkbox-wise, fine, it made sense, but with Michael Oku having gone to the States for All In weekend earlier this month, it kind of meant that, the actual face-to-face build was pretty much one show. That 229 show at the start of the month, you had Ricky Knight Jr. attacking Nino Bryant. Throughout, Michael Oku had a face-to-face, a brawl, and then a lot of this has been sit-down promos because Oku wasn't doing the commentary show, Ricky Knight Jr. wasn't on the commentary show, so yeah, this is what happens when you have a big show a month after your last one with not too much to build in between. You have your big men's heavyweight title match come in relatively cold. And not only Ricky Knight Jr. These days has been coming out to negative, neutral reactions, shall we say, just because of how the fan base of the day reacts to him at the moment. I guess most memorable thing of the entrance would have been the Alvin with Chipmunk's accidental theme he got, but technical issues, what are you going to do about it? They were left with a match which a lot of people just felt, it's Ricky Knight Jr. as the challenge of the month. By the end of it, they turned that around. Granted, they had to go into the big box of tricks, have Amira involved, have her, thrown into the guardrails, have her wiped out towards the end of the match. Oku back body dropping Ricky Knight Jr. actually breaking the ramp, just going all over the place. And so, it wasn't a, catch as catch can, keep in the ring match, which you're never going to get with these two. But it went from a match, but it was virtually crickets at the start when Ricky came out and had the crowd literally baying for the blood, but both men bled by the end of it. But yeah, got a new champion, Ricky Knight Jr., and as far as the wider story, this makes a whole lot of sense. You're doing Sha Samuels, I win or I retire. You're not going to get the visceral reaction out of this if Michael Oku's the champion. Michael Oku, long-time babyface, and I know there's been people, myself included, wanting him to turn. Too late for that in terms of this story. You're not getting Michael Oku turn heel, have it settle. It would feel very much like a put-on act for this. So Ricky Knight Jr. is a guy who the crowd doesn't like, for better or for worse. Albeit for some that does seem to stretch into, I don't want to see Ricky Knight Jr. full stop. But it does mean that we do now get Ricky Knight Jr. able to do promos, talk his way into having people believe that he's going to end Sha Samuels' career, and the stuff that went on at the Sheffield show we'll touch on in a moment. That may mean we're not going to see any more face to face with Ricky and Sha. But again, we'll touch on that later. But yeah, at least with this, we've got the much clearer and obvious alignment in terms of who's going to be there to be cheered in Sha Samuels, who's there you want to boo in the champion Ricky Knight Jr. But yeah, longer term, whether it is Sha takes a belt, which I really don't expect, there is that section of fans who do not like Ricky Knight Jr. at all. Just scanning tweets and Discord and forums and what have you, you see people who openly saying, Ricky Knight Jr. is champion, well, I'm not going, or I'll leave the room, or whatever you want to do to protest, or just whatever you want to do, just because you don't like him as a wrestler or performer. But yeah, that's something RevPro is going to have to navigate, because if you take the belt off him straight away, you're going to get those pointing and saying, well, we control the narrative, we've made you make this move. But at the same time, you don't want to be the way WWE was 5-6 years ago, where you dug your heels in, because if you do have that small section of fans who are not happy with the choice and are choosing or talking about not attending because of those choices, that's the kind of thing that can easily spread, especially if it becomes obvious that you're just doing something to stick the proverbial middle finger up at that section of the fan base. Again, I trust what they're doing long term, but it's very rare these days at least in the independent scene, when you see a championship change like this, accompanied by just such that's the new champion, I may not want to go, and not just because he's a bad guy you want to see get beat. Main event time, we had Mercedes Moné retaining the undisputed British Women's Championship over Sapphire Reed. Now, look, this is a match I think all but the most ardent of Sapphire Reed fans would say this wasn't a match that anyone ever doubted the result of. The bigger question was, how was Sapphire Reed going to respond in the biggest match of her career so far? And it's a test she passed with flying colours. A lot of the I guess the obvious stuff coming in, was she going to win, or if we could throw collective place and part? They came out of it, but were sent to the back from the off, so this was pretty much one-on-one. Sapphire, let's say, more than held her own. I think the viewer put down that her way she took the Mercedes Moné finish, the Moneymaker, the cleanest and smoothest I've seen for a long while. Definitely not in the same ballpark as when that move got debuted in the Tokyo Dome. But post-show or post-match even, had the Cutthroat Collective come back out with Lizzie Eve and Mercedes Blaze attacking Mercedes. Nina Samuels was there, but with her injury, not cleared for contact. Sapphire Reed notably not getting herself involved either, so there's a thread for going ahead. Kanji ran out to make the save, and you'd think just based on simple wrestling logic, you can be getting maybe Kanji and Mercedes Moné against two from Evo, Blaze and Kanji in the main event, since, not the main event, but on the anniversary show the next time that Mercedes Moné is over. Alex Windsor, of course, still part of the Cutthroat Collective, but hasn't been written out officially, so maybe bring her over. AEW and RevPro versus AEW and RevPro if you want to go that road. And then, you end up with whatever happens and potentially loop back to Kanji against Mercedes Moné if and when you do the title change, because certainly the way Kanji's been consistently portrayed in RevPro this year, while she lost back at high stakes, she is still definitely the one you'd have in the pole position to take the belt off of Mercedes Moné when the time comes. But yeah, Summer Sizzle, decent enough show. No few wobbly points, but a show that I was absolutely surprised by the the general lack of buzz outside the British Indies. Now, I don't know whether that's people just the luster's gone for Mercedes Moné doing the independents. I know she did PTW in Poland on the Sunday afterwards, and I'm just going to scroll up on Cage Match for name there, because while I know the initials, I don't know the name of the company. It's Primetime Wrestling. In Poland, she had a match with Diana Strong with the PTW Women's title and a newly created title from a company in Italy. Well, actually, both the PTW Women's title and that Italian title were newly created. So Mercedes Moné leaves Europe with 8 belts, so heaven help whoever's checking her hand luggage, because that's going to be an ongoing game of show and tell when she goes to shows. The Mercedes Moné train rolls through Europe, and I would not be surprised if she comes back and picks up even more belts, at least from mainland Europe, before she starts shedding them. But elsewhere within RevPro, it's been a pretty busy July for the company. I record this on the 29th, so end of the month. But big news is this Sunday's show at the 229 at Great Portland Street in London is going to be RevPro's final show at the 229. And heck, it's been described as the last wrestling/sporting event at that venue. There was an announcement at the start of the month by RevPro that basically the 229 decided they weren't going to do wrestling there. So even though RevPro had announced dates through the end of 2025, they had to find a new venue. They're looking... they have confirmed they're moving to Porchester Hall in Bayswater, London, near Royal Oak Tube Station, those of you who are familiar with your underground maps. So they're starting in September, which will be on the first Saturday of the month. The London monthly shows will be at Porchester Hall. I guess we'll go back to the Keep Alive in London tag, and then the first end of the month for the rest of the year. And I believe RevPro said they have all of 2026's dates already booked there for the Porchester Hall. So new venue. It has done boxing before. The the initial shots of the building look pretty swanky. It's be a marked change from the 229 and the cockpit before. So be interesting to see how RevPro produce it, the different look and feel of the building. I did note there was a balcony there and, chandelier, so those of you who saw was the Wrestling Retribution project, maybe a little bit unlike Kenny Omega's chandelier breaking exploits there, but one to maybe keep an eye out for potential accidents of the building. I think we'll be needing more than a security policy for the chairs based on how RevPro have been in most London shows. Following week in Coventry, we had the main event there of Jay Joshua and Cesaro in the last man standing match. It was a very comprehensive win for Jay Joshua in match with Tech. It felt like it's a write-off for Cesaro. I mean, he wasn't booked for Summer Sizzler, wasn't booked for the Sheffield show, and certainly all the storylines right now, there's nothing there to bring him back. And of course, we're recording this on a Tuesday. Chances are by the time this is being posted, he's been announced for a big match at 229 this weekend, and no stuff for the anniversary. But definitely, if this was going to be a jumping off point, it's been written as one and could very well easily play out to be one. We also mentioned the return of the Great British Tag League. you'll probably piece together from the results we've spoken of so far, but we have 2 blocks of 4. Block A, the Young Guns, Luke Jacobs, Ethan Allen, the tag champions, although will not be defended during the tournament. The Bryant brothers of Xander and Leland Bryant, Cowboy Wave, Manderson, Thomas Shire, and grizzled young veterans Zach Gibson, James Drake. They round off Block A. Block B, Connor Mills, Jay Joshua, CPF, Stanley Black, Joe Lando, Mark True and Kieran Lacey, and Sons of Southampton of David Francisco and JJ Gale round off Block B. Just from those 2 lineups, Block A definitely the stronger of the 2. And, last episode with Neil, we were talking about how RevPro through TK Cooper backhanded the hell out of, oh, you're just a tag team wrestler, as it was almost a put down. So it's a little bit weird about how quickly this came up to maybe rehab tag team wrestling after that whole thing. And as we said, this is going to be wrapped up at the anniversary shows and results so far. We have had it live in London 97 of a 229 at the start of July. The Young Guns beating the Bryan brothers. This was a rematch from Coventry back in May. Match that I was absolutely not a fan of, and unfortunately this time it's a little bit better, but still not to the usual standards you would expect. And this is a match that wasn't advertised. Like, RevPro had advertised there'll be a Great British Tag League match. They did not outright say Young Guns versus Bryan brothers, and the only way people knew the Young Guns were even going to be in this show was because Ethan Allen tweeted it, which, RevPro seemed to like us doing Guess Who a lot for matches, which we'll come back to in a second. Of course, Summer Sizzle, we mentioned, GYV beating the Young Guns, CPF beating Sons of Southampton. Sheffield this past Sunday, grizzled young veterans beat the Bryants. Sons of Southampton beat True and Lacey. So, as we stand here at the end of July, the current standings, GYV have 6 points from their 2 matches, top the block. The Young Guns have got 3 points from their 2 matches, of course, 1 win, 1 loss. Bryan brothers are out with no points from 2 matches. They can't overcome, obviously, GYV at the top. Cowboy Way, no points from no matches. We'll get to that very soon. Block B, pretty similar. CPF at top with 3 points from 1 match. Sons of Southampton have 3 points from 2 matches, so head-to-head, CPF ahead of them. True and Lacey, nothing from their 1 match, and Mills and Joshua have yet to begin their campaign. So yeah, speaking of Guess Who, as RevPro, in lieu of posting a schedule, we've had to do a fair amount of playing who the hell's facing who when, because we don't have a schedule. Remaining shows that RevPro will probably be doing this on, we have Live in London 98 this coming Sunday, August 3rd. The following weekend, Friday, August 9th, Saturday, August 10th, they've got Double Impact in Berlin with the GWF. Cowboy Way announced for both of those shows, so you'd expect they're going to be doing those matches there. Live in Southampton 37 on August 17th, that's the final show before the anniversary, which is night 1 on Friday, August 22nd. Night 2, Saturday, August 23rd in Crystal Palace in South London. And, RevPro kind of hinted that, night 1 is going to be where the Tag League finale is. So, based on that, Cowboy Way, they're both booked against each other. Manders against Thomas Shire for Jersey Championship Wrestling in New Jersey on August 3rd. So, by default, they can only do a match on the 2 Berlin shows and Southampton to wrap it up. There is a Portsmouth contender show on the 16th, but that's effectively considered non-canon for these shows. Mills and Joshua in a similar spot. We had Mills work against Shah and Sheffield, as I had Shah and Wolverhampton. They have the Live in London show on Sunday, not announced, but they have that plus the 2 Berlin shows, but they are announced for, and Live in Southampton. So yeah, just a little bit odd that they're back-ending both block, 2 teams in a block each, with teams that just haven't had a match yet. Scheduling probably could have been a bit better, but short of having 2 shows that are condensed with tag round robin matches, I get it. Just I wouldn't have had 2 teams do the same thing, and you'd expect, just because both of them are coming in from from a standing start, one of those teams you'd expect will hit the ground running and get through to the final. The other one maybe have had too much to do to get there. We will see. Wrapping up Sheffield, other bits and pieces. Zoe Lucas beat Alexis Falcon in Zoe's first match in RevPro for a while, and Alexis is for over a year. It was post-match attack from Falcon, drew out Amiwa to make the save, who looked to have picked up an injury in all that. One looked to be part of the storyline, the other looks to be legitimate. So best wishes for Amiwa from that. Early in the night, Liam Slater beat Michael Oku by DQ and then cut a promo on Oku. Flat out accused him of being an abuser because he super kicked Amira at Summer Sizzler. A little bit over the line. And again, I don't know what the injury to Amira afterwards maybe reframes things, or at least how we're going to edit stuff around, but we'll see where that goes. But definitely we may be heading towards a Leon Slater against Michael Oku again at the anniversary show, potentially in a number one contenders match. Shah Samuels defeated Connor Mills after, of course, beating Jay Joshua at Summer Sizzler. After the match, Ricky Knight Jr. came out and attacked Harry Milligan and Shah Samuels with multiple Rikishi drivers. That looks to be a mini write-off for Shah, so I guess we're doing the promo-only route again for Ricky Knight Jr. And then finally, CPF lost to Los Tranquilos to Japón Bushi Knight on the main event. Pretty much the same as what we saw with True and Lace, your holiday camp style thing. Nobody really buying that CPF were going to win. But again, this was a match to get Bushi Knight over their first appearances after New Japan. And it would deal, I think, was a bigger crowd than normal in Sheffield. So, yeah, a unexpected booking that kind of paid dividends to some extent. Going to wrap up a couple of segments or a couple of pieces from Germany. Of course, GWF had their usual monthly show at the Festsaal Kreuzberg in Berlin earlier this month. Summer Smash, one title change there. Lawrence Roman and Stephanie Mays won the GWF mixed tag team titles. Calling themselves Blackout, they beat Gold Rush of Palawan Nima and Sultan Suzu, ending the latter's 7-month run as champions. I believe Roman and Mays will be on those Double Impact shows next month, which we'll cover once they've actually happened. And finally, the XW were in Frankfurt. Broken Rules main evented with Ilya Bloom beating Ahura in a dog collar submission match. Ilya Bloom has become quite adept when it comes to plunder matches. We saw at Drive of Champions in Oberhausen in June the no DQ match, last man standing match with Manders. That was all blood and guts, as some would have put it. This time around, we had plenty of blood, we had plenty of plunder, had drawing pins being used. But again, Manders is facing Ahura at Shortcut for Top next month, and you'd expect, with Bloom and Ahura trading wins back and forth, things seem to be pointing to at least one of them going for the title at the Pro Wrestling Grand Prix in September. And if Manders retains the title next month, maybe a freeway, but we will see. And of course, we'll have a lot more about WWE's Pro Wrestling Grand Prix in the weeks ahead as those 3 tournaments in one weekend continue to flesh out. But that will do it for another episode of Euro Clutch. Very Rev Pro heavy episode. Next time out, we will still be talking a little bit about Rev Pro, but we're going back to the past. 9 years ago, in fact, from the hottest match of the summer of 2016. We're going to take a look at Vader against Will Ospreay. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you down the road.
My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungy AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines. And we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy every week on the Voice of Wrestling Network.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.